Welcome to the webinar, everybody. This is Carl Smith. I'm manager of professional solutions throughout North America. Joining me today is my colleague and friend Randy Mayberry out of somewhere on the eastern seaboard of North Carolina, somewhere over there, who is our resident iLogic guru and has been doing these he and I have been partnering together doing these webcasts for quite a while. They're a very popular series of events offering you some tips and tricks and some ideas and all that kind of stuff with regard to design, automation, inventor. I'm not going to steal a whole lot of his thunder, but I do want to go through some of those slides that I have to go through, the requirements, right? First of all, if you're not familiar with us, you don't know who we are. Randy and I and Cassie all work for Imaginate Technologies. We're part of an umbrella corporation of RAND Worldwide. RAND, including Imaginate, also has a company, our sister company called RAND 3D, another provider for solutions with regard to other CAD systems and softwares, as well as Ascent, which is the courseware branch of our company. So if you purchase or go get and download official Autodesk training courseware from Autodesk's site or otherwise, our partner, our sister company at Ascent are the folks that write that stuff. So I guess all this means we're quite heavily invested in the design engineering world of both Autodesk and other technologies, as well as the learning and professional development behind all of that stuff. A couple of pushpins here. This one is actually a little older map than what I'd intended to show you. Since we built this map, since I built this map, there's a lot of other pushpins, as you will, through mergers and acquisitions and growth our company has shown. Some of that stuff in the middle we're missing right there in Kentucky and Missouri and Ohio and all those types of things are all kind of filled in now as we've grown exponentially as a customer, thanks to you guys as our customers and supporting our growth through our services and our technology, as well as our continued desire to have a pushpin wherever you are to offer our support and our services. So, kind of little things that we do. What do we do? We're known as a VAR, right? A value-added reseller for Autodesk services and Autodesk products. But it goes far beyond that. What we're responsible for is, of course, the consulting behind, not just teaching, right? But the consultative engagements behind implementing and integrating our technology into your systems that include data management, product lifecycle management, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to read this whole slide deck to you, but you'll kind of see that we offer all kinds of services up into professional education and development. That includes, today's world, a lot of live online and things like that, blended learning, all of those kind of things, as well as our support offerings where you can go to self-paced tutorials, self-paced learning videos and quizzes and all that kind of stuff from there. We like to brag on our relationship with Autodesk, our partner, simply because they have a lot of high expectations for our performance with regards to how we work with our customers and the relationships we have with all of our clients. Through our implementation methodologies and our support systems, we're very proud of the fact that we're a top-rated a partner with Autodesk from a customer satisfaction. We call it CSAT, right? Customer satisfaction stuff. So we are by far the largest authorized training center, the largest authorized reseller, and in fact do quite a lot of work directly for Autodesk as well too. So they bring us into a lot of accounts where they are, I guess, the major account record or major account reseller of record, right? Sometimes they'll take those big ones and then utilize us for our services. So this is kind of our bragging slide where we are with respect to our clients and with our largest and with Autodesk as well. So I've gotten through all my slide decks. Let's got that business out of the way. Let us get to presentation. How's that sound? Randy, I am attempting to make you the presenter.
Okie doke.
And sir, you should have the con.
Let me share my screen.
All right, so here it comes. I will put myself on mute. You guys enjoy and ready for the show.
All right. If Carl or Cassie, if one of you can let me know, just make sure you can see my screen.
Yep, looks good.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. We're here to talk about exporting our bill of materials or our BOM with automation, with iLogic. We're going to talk about some simple ways of doing that and then some more advanced ways of doing that. And as we're getting into that and talking about it, we're going to throw in some other subjects about the BOM views and the level of detail and how those work with our bill of materials and how that affects exporting things with iLogic. So what I've got here is a simple belt conveyor, and I'm just going to run through a couple different configurations just so we can understand what's going on here. We see that I have two legs in this guy now. It's a 90-inch long conveyor. If I extend that thing, change it to 160 inches there and hit the configure button, we know because of the tribal knowledge, the rules of the design of this piece of equipment, if I get so long, such a leg span, I need to throw another leg in there. So we'll notice that it turned on a middle leg here. It added some additional brackets to the weldment. I've got some other hardware there as well. So keep in mind there that we could have that middle leg. And also the drive. I'm currently what I'm considering a right-hand drive here. I can switch this guy to a left hand, hit the configure button. I also changed it back to the 90-inch version. So it moved my gearbox, my motor, my drive components over to the other hand or the other side of my conveyor. So just give you a couple ideas there of some of the things that the automation is currently suppressing, moving around, etc. So as we get into the bill of materials, we can understand the differences in those. So if I'm trying to export my bill of materials, this is something that we typically want to run against many different files, right? I don't want it just to be inside of this conveyor assembly. I want to be able to write a generic enough rule that I can run it against anything, right? I don't want it tied down to anything. So in that case, I want to do an external rule. External rules are just that. They're not tied to a file. That file, that rule is stored somewhere else. And you generally try to write it, again, vanilla enough so I can run it against multiple files. There's no hard coding of file names, etc. inside of there. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to come over to my external rules tab of my iLogic browser. And I do have a folder in here called BOM. So I'm going to right click right on that folder and choose create new external rule. Okay. I'm going to give it a name here. I'm just going to call it simple export .vb. I can call it vb.ilogicvb.txt, really whatever file format I want to do there. Okay. So first we're going to talk about the simple way of exporting a bill of materials. And Autodesk made it very simple. There is a snippet in the System Snippet folder under the BOM called Export. As I hover over that for a second, we can see the tooltip that pops up. Tell me it's going to export the BOM view to an Excel worksheet, and then in parentheses there, Inventor API for other formats. So to put that snippet into my rule, I simply double click it, right? It applies my snippet into my rules editor. I've got two arguments here that I'm probably going to be playing around with, modifying a little bit. The main one is going to be the BOM view. So that's this first string argument here. Do I want to look at the parts only, or do I want to look at the structured? And I'll talk about those more in just a second. The second argument would be the file name, right? What am I going to call this spreadsheet? And then the third argument that we're not going to worry about on this demonstration is what's the file format? And they also include these commented out lines just below it for other enumerators, right? This is a K Microsoft Excel format. That way it understands that it's spitting out a Microsoft Excel file, okay? So for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and hit save just so I can save that rule, and I'm going to close it. And I'm going to pop open my bill of materials. So I want, oh, yep. Need to save. I want to talk a little bit about those BOM views. Okay. What came up in the snippet by default is parts only. So when I go to my bill of materials, I see 3 different tabs across the top here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about them, but in case you're not aware of what's going on, the very first tab is the model data. And that shows me basically a replica of what's going on in my model browser. I move this window over a little bit, I can see the structure. And if I expand one of these by hitting the small plus sign there, I can see what it's made up of and then what it's made up of, right? It replicates what's going on in my model browser. Okay. The structure tab, and if these are disabled, by the way, sometimes you might open this guy up and it'll say disabled. I can simply right-click on it and choose Enable BOM View. Okay. So the Structure tab takes into account how it's modeled, right? How the model is structured, as well as the BOM structure for each one of those items. As we look at this BOM structure column, most of these are listed as normal. We'll see some in here are listed as purchased. Okay. So the Structured tab takes into account what that BOM structure is. The normal BOM structure is nothing special about it. Quantities don't get modified in any particular way. It has no effect on its children, etc. An item just simply shows up for as many as you have put into the bill of materials or into your assembly. Okay? A purchased BOM structure means it's going to show up in my Structure tab just as normal. It doesn't affect that in any way. What it affects is my Parts Only tab. Okay? I flip over to my Parts Only tab. It's going to show the children and not the, or I'm sorry, it's going to show the assembly and not the children on the Parts Only tab. So an example of that, say maybe a hydraulic cylinder or a pneumatic cylinder that you purchase. You don't want to see the piston rod and the housing and the rod clevis, right? You want to see a cylinder because that's what you go buy from your vendor. Okay. Those are some of the more common ones. There's others as well. I go and jump in here real quick and look at inseparable, phantom, and reference. Reference doesn't show in the bill of materials at all, quite often used with skeleton modeling. If you're suppressing and unsuppressing components with iLogic, it's actually modifying the BOM structure to reference. A phantom is an assembly that you want to put together for ease of assembly purposes, but you don't want to see it in the bill of materials. You want to see the lower level children at that level. That one's always a little bit confusing. Think of something that you always put together. Might aid in the engineering, right? I always put this bearing and these screws together this way all the time, but this doesn't have a part number, right? When I put this into my assembly, I want to see the bearing and I want to see the socket head cap screw, the lock washer, the nut, etc. If I created this assembly as a phantom and then put it into a next level, so I'm currently seeing my bearing assembly here now. If I change that to a phantom and look at my Structured tab, I'm no longer seeing that bearing assembly. I'm seeing the bearing and then the components underneath it. Okay, that's a little bit about BOM structure. It's sometimes a little boring, but if you understand how those BOM structures affect your bill of materials, you're going to be able to get your bill of materials to look the way you want it. Okay? And it is going to affect how we export things inside of iLogic. Okay? So I'm going to jump back to my assembly. And then the Parts Only tab, that only shows parts or subassemblies whose bill of material structure is set to normal, purchased, or inseparable. Okay? Quite often it's used for like a summarized bill of materials. Okay? I'm seeing a complete total of 64 of these half-inch flat washers. Right? It's going through all of the lower level subassemblies, putting everything at one single level. Okay. Let's now that we've talked about that, let's jump back and look into our simple export rule. So Again, this argument here is what BOM view are you trying to export? I want to change mine to structured. Okay, I want to pull out the structured bill of materials first. And then the file name is quite often going to be the assembly name, right? You may want to put some other information on there. Since we're writing this as an external rule, and I want it to be vanilla enough to be able to run against multiples, I want to grab the file name of the current assembly that I'm working on. Okay, so over in my document snippet, there is a file name snippet. This is giving me the file name without the file extension, right? The false on the end. So I'm going to declare as file name as string equals this doc.file name. Right? So no matter what assembly I'm running in, I'm going to get that information out, and I'm going to use that argument in place here. Okay, I'm not going to give it a string. This is going to be a variable at this point. That way I can run this against multiple files. Okay. My file name happens to have a space in it right now. We don't like spaces, so I'm going to do a little bit of conversion here as well. I'm going to swap out my space with an underscore. Put one too many spaces in there. There we go. Okay. So since that's a string, I can do a replace, taking out the space, right, and replacing it with an underscore. Again, if any assembly happens to have a space in it, it's going to replace that space out of there. Okay. Now I've got it on structured. I've got my file name captured. I'm going to go ahead and run my rule, okay? So I'll hit save and run. Uh-oh, we have an error, right? This BOM could not find a BOM view named structured. Don't worry, I was expecting this, right? We are currently in our iLogic level of detail. I want to go ahead and hit OK that and close out my rules editor here. Take a look over in my model browser. I am in a custom LOD, a customized level of detail. Anytime you're working with the bill of materials inside or with iLogic, it has to be in the master level of detail. Okay? Don't worry, the items that you've suppressed using automation are not going to show up. They won't be in our bill of materials. For example, that middle leg, right? The middle leg is currently being suppressed. He's suppressed with automation. I'm going to jump to my master level of detail. All of the components come back on, right? Those other guards are back on. My other leg is on. Okay? But when I go back into my simple export rule and save and run, it's currently exporting my bill of materials. Give him a second to finish up and run. And let me pull over my Windows Explorer here, right? And there's the Excel file, the conveyor assembly.xlsx, right? That's the one we just exported. Notice it took out the space from the file name and replaced it with the underbar. So if I double click that so I can launch Excel, take a look at what it gave us here. I'll resize some of these columns. Okay, so it gave me the item number, the part number, the BOM structures, right? So my quantities. Take a look at my leg assembly, right? That quantity is 2. It's not 3, which you might think because we're in the master level of detail, right? And I've got the right-hand chain guard. I don't have the left-hand chain guard on here. That's because the suppression or the component.isActive iLogic snippet changes that BOM structure to reference. Okay, that's why they're not showing up in my structured bill of materials. Another thing to notice here, if I jump back to my file and take a look at my bill of materials, is the columns or those iProperties or that data that's coming out here, right? It's an exact match. So the columns that simple exports is what's showing up in my bill of materials currently. So I'm seeing the title, I'm seeing the description. Okay. This process, using that simple BOM export iLogic snippet, is the exact same output that I would get if I were to come to my bill of materials inside of Inventor, and up in the upper left, there's an export bill of materials. Running through this process here gives me the exact same thing as if I used the snippet. Okay. So let's run through another configuration here. I'm going to once again go to a longer version and then the left hand, just so we have that other leg. I have the left hand chain guard. I'm going to have additional hardware as well. Okay. I'm going to simply right click on my export rule. Oh, once again, need to be in my master level of detail. Run my simple export rule. We'll pull that assembly back up, or that spreadsheet back up. And we'll see the left-hand chain guard. We'll see 3 leg assemblies. Right, so there's my 3 leg assemblies. I see my left-hand chain guard, etc. Okay. My washer hardware amounts have obviously jumped up as well. Okay. So ideally, you don't want your user to have to remember to jump back and forth to that custom level of detail, right, or the master level of detail. So we can do that with code as well. I'm going to jump back into my simple export rule. Actually, I'm going to switch to the iLogic first. Jump back into my simple export rule. Put some text here at the top. I'm going to cheat here so you all don't see me having to type. I've already got this written. So what I'm doing here is declaring a level of detail representation. Right? I'm declaring OLOD as that level of detail representation. And then I'm setting the master level of detail. I'm activating it. Okay? This is wrapped up in a try-catch finally. The reason for that is really, in this case, for when I go back to the iLogic or when I'm switching to something that doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, it's going to create it. So then at the very end, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to switch it back. Actually, in this case, I'm not creating it, but that's what this bit of code is usually used for. So at the beginning of when it runs this rule, it's going to switch to the master level of detail. And then it's going to go do the export. And then it's going to switch back to iLogic. Okay? That way I don't have to worry about being in a certain level of detail. I run that rule. It switches itself automatically, does the export, and then switches back to the iLogic LOD. Okay. I can do the same thing again with the parts only. It's simply modifying, again, this first argument. And I can see that if I hover over, right, exporting the BOM view. Which BOM view are you trying to export? I'll go ahead and run this again, doing the parts only. It's done. I will pull that guy up and we'll see a completely different set of information. So again, the parts only is quite often used for a summarized bill of material. Here's all the lower level parts, whether they be manufactured, whether they be purchased, that go in there. So notice I'm not seeing the leg assembly anymore. I'm seeing the foot plate and the formed members and the cross members that go into that. Okay. Just don't save that. So again, that's the simplest way of exporting the bill of materials, is using the export snippet. Okay. Something a little more advanced is using the API to export the bill of materials. Okay. We've been using an iLogic snippet. Remember that iLogic is simply a friendly wrapper around the API that allows me to make API calls using a language that's not as complex. Okay. So let's take a quick look at a way I can do this using the API. And as a matter of fact, there's a sample program in the help file. I get questions a lot about, where can I go to find information? The help file is tremendously helpful as long as you know what you're looking for. Okay, it's that searching for it that is a bit of a pain. So I'm going to search for exporting BOM. And look here, the fourth option here is exporting the assembly BOM. There's a sample API sample here that lists how to export the structured and parts-only views of the active assembly to an Excel file. Okay. This is written in VBA. iLogic is based on VB. The VBA is an older version, so some things we have to make a few switches, but I can simply copy this code. I don't need the public sub and the in sub. If I were to put those into iLogic, it's going to force me to call it submain. Right? I couldn't use the BOM export. But I'm simply highlighting that text. I'm going to copy it straight, go right back to Inventor here. Once again, I'm going to create a new external rule. I'm going to call this API simple export. And I'm going to paste it in there. Okay. Notice the little squiggly lines underneath the set commands. Okay. Any let or set commands are no longer valid. So what I quite often do is just to replace with those. I'm going to search for set space and I'm going to replace it with nothing. Okay. And hit the replace all in this rule. Something else that needs to happen is I need to enclose these paths down here in parentheses. Okay, and I am going to change the location as well to put it to where our files are going. Okay, so let's take a look at what this is doing. It's declaring ODoc as the assembly document, and it's calling that or setting that as the active document, right? This is the active assembly that we're in. It's getting the bill of materials. It's setting the structured first only level to false. And structural levels could have first level only or multi-levels, right? So I'm going to set my structured view as enabled, and then I'm setting the BOM view to that structured. Right? This is just like what we saw in the iLogic snippet. And then it's going to export that out into a certain file here. Okay. Then it enables the parts only. Again, it's setting what that BOM view is again, and then it's exporting that. Okay. This is going to do two separate files, right? A BOM structured to all levels, and then a BOM parts only. Parameter's incorrect. What's wrong? I'm in my iLogic level of detail, right? We did not put that little snippet of code in there that would swap it for me. So I changed to my master level of detail. I hit save and run, and this is going to take a few seconds longer because it's running through and exporting the structured bill of material, and then it's running through and exporting in the parts only. Okay, so I'm going to let that finish up here. And pop open my Windows Explorer here, and we see the BOM parts only. We see the BOM structured all levels. And we'll go ahead and open this guy. And I'm going to resize these. So since I'm set to all levels, Right, I see the multiple levels here. I've got a leg assembly is item 1, and then 1.1. That 1.1 is made up of this leg assembly and this leg cross member. The leg assembly, right, is made up of the foot plate. I can see that structure going down through the item. Okay. And then pulling up the parts only. Resize some of these guys. Okay. Again, I'm getting the same columns that's currently showing in my bill of materials. If I wanted more data to show up, I just have to show those in my bill of materials before I run these rules. Okay. So again, I could change how the rest of those look with those few other arguments that's in my rule, right? Do I want to see first levels or do I want to see all levels? What views am I trying to see? Okay. So something that's something a little bit more advanced, but it's still giving me or replicating the information that's showing up in my bill of materials as I go look at it. Right? I'm still seeing the title, the description, stock number, etc. Okay. Another way that's even more advanced is, again, using the API to access the bill of materials, loop through all the rows in the bill of materials, and then get whatever information out of that component that I need. Okay, so I'm going to open up another rule here called API Advanced Export, and I'll go through the majority of this. I'm not going to talk about all of it, but I'll give you an idea of what it's doing. Okay, something very similar to what we saw before. We're declaring an assembly document here, right? I'm switching to the master level of detail, just like we saw before. I'm getting the bill of materials. Okay, I'm getting the structured BOM view. I'm setting OBOM view to the structured bill of materials. Later, we'll come through and swap these so I can get the parts only version of that. I'm enabling that structured view, and I'm setting it to parts only, right, just like we saw before. Here's where it varies a little bit. What I'm going to do in this case is take a bill of materials template. I've already got a BOM template that's out there that's set up the way my company wants it to look. Right? We've got a logo on there. We've got a header. We can throw some additional information on there. It's got column names set up already. So I'm simply going to make a copy of that using the IO file copy process of what the template is, and then where I'm going to go put it. Right? I've got some new job BOM name. Okay. We're going to start using Go Excel here, and I'll hit on Go Excel a little bit more. Go Excel is an easy way of using iLogic to access data, write data, etc. Through Excel. Right? There's a snippets category called Excel data links. We're going to use some cell value data. We're going to use right rows. Okay. So what it's doing here first is setting my display alerts to false, and then it's opening up that spreadsheet, that newly copied Excel spreadsheet that's from my template. Okay. Here I'm querying the BOM row properties. Okay. I'm calling a subroutine. So I'm calling query row BOM row properties, and I'm throwing it some information. We'll get down there at the bottom and see what happens in just a second. And then I'm saving my Excel file and I'm closing it. Right? I'm using the Go Excel properties there for save and close. Just like we saw previously, I'm switching back to my iLogic level of detail. And then I'm throwing out some information there. Oh, hey, we're done here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save and run this and let it go. And we will take a look at what it gave me. And then we'll take a look at that bit of code where it's doing all the heavy lifting. Okay. So again, there's my little dialog box that says, hey, your BOM export's complete. So I'll scroll down a little bit here. It just made this iLogic BOM export webcast BOM. open that guy up. So we get a little more fancier output here, right? Again, I've got a logo in here. I've got some text at the top. We're seeing other data come out of here, right? I'm getting my PM code out of here right now as well. That is simply an iProperty that's inside of those components. We weren't seeing it in the bill of materials. Therefore, we weren't seeing it in those other exports when I was using the more simple way of exporting. Okay. Let me go ahead and close this guy. And we'll take a look at that advanced export again. Again, what I'm doing here is calling this subroutine. So I'm getting the bill of materials, and then I'm passing some information down to this subroutine. Okay. What this is doing, in essence, is looping through every row that's in my bill of materials. Okay. Just like when I pop open the bill of materials and I see those things listed almost like a spreadsheet, I'm going through each one of those rows, and then I'm getting information about it. I want to get the part number, and I want to get the description. Okay. Those are design tracking property spreadsheets. Those are on the, for the life of me, I don't remember if it's project or if it's on the summary tab. I think it's project tab of the iProperties page. Okay. So I'm going to grab that information. I've got some additional checks in here because I've got some content center parts, right? A lot of that hardware that we saw in there was placed from content center. I was lazy and I did not want to go back and re-edit my content center tables and add that PM code. Okay, so what I'm doing here is making an assumption that if it came out of the content center, I'm going to say it's a purchased item, right? In this case, everything that's in there it's all hardware. So I want to just make it a purchased component. Okay. So again, for each row of my bill of materials, I'm pulling out the part number, I'm pulling out the description, and I'm pulling out the PM code, right? That's a custom iProperty. So I defined my custom iProperty sets. And then down here at the bottom, I'm using that Go Excel again, right? The Go Excel cell value. First, I'm writing out the item number property, and then the item quantity, the part number property, the description property, and then the PM code property. Again, I'm making an assumption here that if it's not, or I'm sorry, if it is coming out of the content center, I'm just going to force it to be a P because I know there's no PM code inside of that, right? I'm handling that error. Okay. And then down here a little bit lower, I'm doing some recursive action. If that row has lower level children, I can go down into that if I want to. So this is really where the meat of what this more advanced version is doing. Right? Everything up top here, we pretty much saw with the other versions. Okay? As opposed to letting iLogic or as opposed to letting Inventor export the bill of materials as shown, I'm going through each one and saying, well, you know, I need the part number, I need the description, I need the PM code, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So say we want to add a little bit more information to this. Let open my Excel spreadsheet here. Maybe we want to throw the job number or the assembly file name or something like that into some of these fields, right? This is going to be printed out. It's going to be handed to somebody or someone's going to review it for purchasing. I need to know what job data that's going for. Okay. So up here at the top, after I've gone through and queried my BOM row properties, right, I'm all done writing that information. I'm going to put in a couple more lines here to write my assembly level values. Okay. And I'll use that Go Excel, that cell value. And then the argument here is what's the cell address, right? The the iLogic rules editor, the IDE is getting better and better. So as I'm hovering there, I see the tooltips that tell me this is the cell address as a string, right? So I know I need to put that thing in quotes. And I want to write in D1, right? That's the D1 cell of Excel. And I'm going to make a string concatenation here of some text. I think it was, I think I have a custom in there called job number. Hope so. Okay. So again, what value, what cell I'm writing in is D1, and then it's going to be just a concatenation of the word job with the space, and then the job number of the current assembly. Okay. Let's go ahead and save and run that. Let that guy go. And we'll pop him open. Right. So there now we've written that information up there so that when this is printed out again, people know what job we're talking about. Okay. So there's a lot you can do with the Go Excel values. If you want to get into formatting these cells, you know, highlighting cells, getting into the borders, changing the text font and whatnot, you can do that stuff as well. You just need to get into the Excel API of that, and maybe we'll save that for some other webcast. But what I've done in this case is I've already set my template up the way I want it to look. Right, that's this BOM template. That's what the code is going to and grabbing a hold of and making a copy of. Right, it looks like this. So I've already got some of the things set up that I needed to be. I'm simply coming in and starting here and writing out information. Again, if you want to get into the Excel API, you could create a brand new spreadsheet from scratch and do all of this formatting with that code as well. Okay. Go ahead and close this. So again, simple ways of exporting in my iLogic snippet, that BOM export. Right, that's the easiest way of doing it. It's going to give me an exact replica of either the structured tab or the parts only tab. Right? And it's going to give me the information that's currently showing there. Okay, that might be enough to handle 75–80% of what you're trying to do when you're exporting this information. Okay. Also in the BOM snippet, real quickly, are some override quantities. Go a couple levels up above here. I can set override quantities of a particular part number, right? It's going to go through the model data. That part number argument is the part number iProperty, and then what do I want that quantity to be? Okay, that's going to be just like going through and overriding the quantity here. Right, I get that big bold blue text. Typically a bad thing to see, right? That's a static value now. We need to switch that back to the calculate quantity. And that's what the other snippet there is for in that BOM category. Switching something back to calculate quantity as opposed to being an overridden quantity. Okay, so I just want to touch on that real quick too. And then there's more advanced versions. Again, there's a sample help file that allows you to export both with one little bit of code. And then there's the more advanced version of looping through the bill of materials and getting out data that I want to get out, disregarding of the information that's currently being shown on here.